So today we're going to talk a little bit about child drawing and child development. And so when we think about children and drawing, I want to ask you a question. First of all, think about the little children in your life. And some of you may have children, some of you have little brothers and sisters, some of you have cousins, some of you have friends that have little children. And I want you to think about the child when they're about 1, 2 years old and they get a marker in their hands. What's the first thing that happens? Either they're drawing on themselves, or they're drawing on the wall, or they're drawing somewhere. So my question to you is this: did you have to provocate them to draw, or did they do it all on their own? This is really an important thought. What is it about making marks that is so attractive to little children? So if you've ever been around a little child that's been in the tub taking a bath and playing with their boat or playing with their ducky, and they're humming and cooing and they're really enjoying themselves, right? They're really splashing and they're just having fun. And we don't tell them, oh, you have to do this, you have to splash, you have. No, they figure it out and they just start enjoying it and they really like the sensation. Well, that same kind of cooing and that same kind of experience starts to happen with drawing. And so what is it about making marks that children are, excuse my pun, drawn to? So what we call art or artistic activity in children is a normal, innate, God-given behavior, which is used to make sense of the world. Like other kinds of behavior, it undergoes changes with time. And this is where this idea of kind of development. Now, we don't want to have exact stages. At this particular time, this is going to happen. But we do know that certain things happen, and then certain other things happen, and we start to see a sort of progression. So it's possible to look at artistic behavior as it develops throughout the life of a person, from the time they're little all the way through. And so there's our picture of Dad. Love that, right? So one of the first areas or stages would be anywhere from 1 to 4 years old. Usually it's early, like 2 or 3. Is this artistic behavior in children begins around 1 year of age, and it's a sensory activity of banging a tool on a surface. So it's like once they start to make the mark and they see it, they start to bang it. And when they start to see that it's happening, they do what's called a bang dot drag. And this is where they like bang it and then they drag it. And so that's the term, bang dot. And we can see the little dots in the drawing, and then we can also see the dragging, right? So you got to remember that little babies, little children, don't have a pincher ability. So they can't take that thumb and first finger and pinch them together the way you do when you hold a pencil. So they pretty much grab it like a fist, and they just sort of, push, drag it around. They're not really like, they don't have the muscle activity, the neuromuscular connection to be able to hold it the way an adult would or an older child. The next, after we see the bang dot and the bang dot drag, is this other type of behavior where we see repetition and variation. And this is where the child is now getting conscious control of their body, and they're getting conscious control of the tool. And this is incredibly important part of development. They learn how to drag the implement to make a mark that results in a linear or circular movement. And you can see that these circles are much more premeditated than the happenstance with the dots, which is kind of like a Jackson Pollock painting, right? So he's just dripping that paint all over the place, and seeing what happens. This is much more premeditated, right? So it's very important to understand this distinction. And after they start making circles, the next thing that we see is when they start to make closed forms. So these are actually closing the circle. And the other thing is that this idea of development is kind of a zigzag. So they'll learn a new tool, then they'll go back to the old fun tool, like banging and dragging the pen or crayon or marker or whatever it is utensil they're using. But what we're seeing now is more shapes. And we're also seeing, and this is also kind of important, is this combination. So we start to see aggregates of more than one. So they'll take the same shape and make it 2 or 3 times. And they'll put it like in proximity to each other. And the shapes are both regular and irregular. So we see both. The next step would be what art researchers call the mandala. So this is around 3 years old, 2 to 3 years old. The child will actually produce a drawing which contains linear and circular elements. So this isn't happenstance. They're doing this particularly. So it's known in mandala is known. It's a Sanskrit word for the magic circle, and the mandala is the immediate precursor of the first drawing of a person by a child. So I kind of like to think of this as a way when a child is trying to draw a person that they're not really concerned about the person's face, because they're more concerned about the essence of the person. So if you close your eyes and you think about your best friend and you think about like what their voice sounds like, or maybe what their face looks like, you might not be able to get a photographic image in your mind. You probably will not. Instead, you're going to get more of like the essence of that person. And children are very, they accept that, they accept this, like, the energetics of it. And so this image is so interesting to me. And so many times what we'll see is a circle with a line going across and a line down the middle, almost resembling a cross. Very interesting. The next stage is called the pre-schematic stage, and this is where we start to see recognizable adults. The child enters into sort of this idea of producing a schema. So like, you've seen children draw flowers. They almost always look like tulips, right? So they're tulips or they're daisies. There's nothing in between. Birds look alike. So we call that a schema. It's like a way to do it. It's a conceptual representation of the things around the child. So this is the child's way of talking about their sensory experience of the world. And there we see what appears to be, because we want to see, so we're going to look for it, is the face. Notice there's no body, no arms yet, none of that. And different children do things differently. So, it's funny as a teacher, if you go into a grade school or middle school, or, like you'll see a kid going from kindergarten all the way through 5th grade, and you can tell right away which drawing is whose. So children have a graphic signature at a very early age. Some children draw very lightly. They draw faces a very particular way. You can look at that one in the upper right. They really look similar. I like the mohawk. So it's a simple graphic equivalent of a person, and is referred to in the literature as a tadpole person, because again, there's not really a body. Over time, a number of variations are added and introduced, so it looks more like a person. But I just wanted to do a little close-up there because I love these. I know, look at that big smile. Oh. Yep. Okay. So the next thing that we start to see is the child will start to accent the important. So what is the important? So in this case, we're calling attention to the hands. Well, we know we have fingers. We just don't know how many, but there's a lot. And so sometimes there might be 10 on one hand and 2 on the other. Like suddenly one of your sisters is getting braces, and now all the drawings of the sister has great big teeth. What we're seeing here is that we're seeing the child trying to create a narrative. So they're drawing attention to an area that is essential to the story that they want to tell in the drawing. So this is a very important part. It's an intellectual part of saying something physical and turning it into a story and putting it into a two-dimensional format. This is incredible. It's like the whole history of the human race all over again. And so, we really need to commend the child, like for how beautiful these drawings are and what they're trying to do and tell us, right? So really quite interesting. So here we can see some of those. We're happy. I just love, still doesn't have a body. And here we go. Yes. So now we start to see the emotional use of color by children in a pre-schematic stage. How I feel when mommy tells me daddy already left for work, right? So now they're basing things on emotional rather than actual appearance. So I think that's so interesting, that kids are able to do that at such an early age. So color is a big part of their existence. And then we start to see new subject matter. So now we're going to start to go to experiences and not just people. In the beginning, we pretty much just see people, but later on, we start to see all kinds of things. So you can imagine, where did that child go today? I would guess they went to the zoo, right? And there's a picture of the house, and there's a window in the house. So all the things that are part of their world. And then we start to see more variations on the theme. So drawings of children between the ages of 4 and 7 become increasingly detailed. Each new drawing reveals the incremental growth of the child's knowledge. I think this is such an interesting thing. We see kids draw everybody kind of the same, and it's sort of a clump. It's like we aren't, we're all there together. And so we might differentiate between size, like the dad might be bigger and the baby might be smaller. But other than that, everybody's kind of there in a clump. And I think about old photographs, like going back to the 1950s and 60s, and how people would take their kids on vacation and they would all stand in the same place and be like, okay, we got to get a photograph in front of the geyser. And then everybody stands in the same place and they take the picture. And it's like, I remember one time I had a photographer who was this great photographer, came to the university and he was lecturing on his work. And he said, when I was young, I looked at all the pictures that my father and my mother had taken, and I thought maybe we traveled around in a clump, that we never were like anything individual. We just always went in that little group and everybody had a place. And that's all the pictures look the same. Of course, we don't do that anymore because we can take pictures so easily because we have those phone cameras. But, at that time, that was like, okay, everybody, got to prove we were here, and we get the picture. Really fun. So here we see this convention of the clump. There's the drawing, and the kids are all drawing, and they still do it today. So, okay, here's another great image. This is romancing. As children come to attribute meaning to their marks, they will name their scribbles. Their naming first occurs after making the mark. So most of the time what will happen is mama will say, oh, who is that? And then they didn't think about it. And then they'll say, oh, that's Susie, but they didn't say, I'm going to draw a picture of Susie first and then draw a picture of Susie. They drew the picture and then later on did the romancing. So this is just one more evidence that language and writing come way after drawing. And why do we care? Because in school, all we do is try to teach the alphabet with sounds that mean nothing to the child. A is for ah. Okay, cool. What does that mean? But I can draw a picture of an ant, I can draw an ant. I might not be able to spell ant. I could draw a mosquito because it stung me and I looked at it really close on my arm. But I can't even say mosquito. I can't write mosquito. But boy, I sure can draw it. But we don't use that. We don't use that in school. We don't use that at home. And we should be. We should be having our children draw every single day. We know from science, there's a great book, and it's called Your Brain on Art. And if any of you have Audible and you want to listen to it, it will really blow you away. Because the research tells us that 45 minutes of continuous drawing, and this is for children, adults, anybody. Doesn't have to be a beautiful drawing. Could be doodling, just moving the pen around on the page, just doing it continuously. 45 minutes of continuous drawing increases the serotonin in your brain as if you had taken an antidepressant. This is like meditation for children. This is like prayer for children, to sit and draw. They just, that ability, as an adult, to move into that space of grace with your prayer, something children don't necessarily understand yet. But boy, they can draw. And so this idea of God-given behavior, this innate ability to focus and concentrate is there for them, but we take it away and we don't think it's important. And we don't give them, their just due. We say, oh, well, that doesn't look like mom, or that doesn't look like Susie. You made her hair purple. Well, they don't even know the difference about purple yet. They just picked a color. It was darker. Okay, that works. That children are just problem solvers at this point. So really a lot to think about. Okay, so then they start making prototypes, like I talked about before, the idea of making a schema. The drawings of children at this age are frequently prototypical forms. Trees are often apple trees, flowers are daisies or tulips. And they continue to develop and grow. And here we can see now we're adding, looks like mom, and she's got high heels on, or either that or she's really pigeon-toed or something, I don't know. And there we've got a beautiful multicolored dress, and the sun is out. The sun is a big one. So then we start to see early narratives. The child is the central, usually, of all their drawings, and the narratives flow from direct experience. So maybe this was walking home, and there you could see the sidewalk, and they were walking from school, and it looks like they're carrying a bag. In the schematic stage, between age 7 and 9, the schemas develop from pre-schematic into fully detailed and conventionalized drawings. So here we can see we have a horizon line. We can see where the grass ends. We've got clouds in the sky in the right place. We have a tree, very tall trunk. We have a sidewalk that goes to a door. We have windows on each side, and we almost always have a chimney. Most houses have a chimney, and there's usually smoke coming out of it. I don't even think houses have a lot of chimneys anymore. A lot of them just have those those roof vents. But, for some reason, kids draw chimneys. I love this one. So this is Jack and Jill going up the hill, and he drew 2 dinosaurs. Love this story. Love this. Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. So then we also see the children doing graphic equivalents. So rather than produce a replica of something seen, schematic children draw objects with equivalent features. So we'll start to see the cat look just like mom's face or whatever. So the cat or the elephant or whatever. And there we can see, what do you think that is? Anyone have an idea? It's a lawnmower. Yeah, love it. Dad must have been mowing the lawn that day. So there's certain forms that are always in children's drawings. We see it over and over again. It's a good thing. These drawings are characterized by forms which are common. So houses, we see a lot of houses. I love that house, by the way. And what else? The sun. We see the sun over and over and over again. If the child isn't drawing images with the sun, we might want to think about what's going on there. Here is, again, remember how I said children draw family in clumps. Yes, they do, over and over again. Doesn't matter. This is how they draw. And they'll draw them all together, and they're always frontal facing, and they're sometimes holding hands. I love this one with all the fingers on the left. Very cute. Another area that we we see changing with this development is children's development of space. So what is pictorial space? So here we see a really nicely drawn horse, but they're trying to figure out where the fence would go. So we're trying to create a space between the fence and the horse and the tree and the sun. So very, very nicely done. And then, of course, their name. I love this. So obviously it's Grandma's birthday. And what are all those lines coming out? Well, those are a lot of lines because those are a lot of candles. And so we call this folding over because when they're looking down, they can't quite figure out that that's coming straight at them. So they do this folding over thing. Really works. Yeah. And I think Grandma had quite a nice birthday there. This is another area of depicting space we see over and over with children, and this is the X-ray view. And so they'll draw planes and cars and all kinds of things that people are in because they know that people are in them, but they don't understand about the doors and how to do it any other way. So they just kind of create this x-ray view. So there's everyone in the van and they're driving away. I love the tires, and it looks like it's raining outside. So as we continue to see children grow and draw, we have this, age of realism. And so children really, really want to make things look like real. And this is when we start to see kids kind of emulating comic books and kind of showing off if they can make their comic character. You'll see the manga, or, other types of comic characters. And they draw them over and over again till they get them just right. This is really great. This is good for kids. It's not copying. It's not bad. No one's born knowing how to bake cookies. The only way you know is just take a recipe and build it. So in order for children to draw, they need to be able to look at other things and draw from them too. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. Children are learning a great deal from about spatial relationships, about relationships in the world, about their identities, about how to explore, how to communicate, how they feel. This is just a very important time. And so the more socialization and of drawing that the children can get at this age is crucial. And then, of course, we start to see more overlapping and diminishing sizes. So we know the tree's far back in the background, the glasses are the right size, the hair's the right color, the shoes actually look like Chuck Taylor's. We're starting to get all the bits. So since the skills necessary to depict individual characters have not been seen yet, children at this level of dawning realism will indicate individual character and profession through the use of distinctive clothing, hair, and accessories. Now here's something that happens. At this time, usually around like 10 years old, 9, 10 years old, this is when students are told not to waste their time in drawing. And this is when they stop. And this is why when they come to college, 80% of college students say, I can't draw anything but a straight line. And what they can draw is something that's probably equivalent to a 9-year-old. Now, why is that not good? Well, because we've basically lost out on years of this important behavior that helps you observe the world and also increases your confidence and doesn't have the rule-bound things that math and other areas do. Like if you don't say to yourself, I'm never going to learn how to add. You just keep working at it. And because you need math, you need to pay your bills, you need to do these things, right? But with drawing, it's like, well, I'm not good at this. Someone made fun of me. It's so emotional because it comes from this very deep part of ourselves. And so, one, it's really important to encourage your child to continue to draw, no matter what. And two, be careful about how you critique their work. Be careful about how you talk to them about it. Because if you get them feeling insecure about how well they're doing, they're going to stop and they're not going to draw. And they're going to be, turn up as adults thinking that they're not creative and that this is just part of that they're just not good enough to do that. And that's not true. Drawing is a learned activity through practice, just like musical instruments, just like everything else. And the more that we know about how art affects the brain, the more important we realize that it is as part of our human innate behavior. So let's take a look at this little video. So this is from quite a while ago, but I really love it. And this is Sylvia Fine, and she talks about Heidi's horse. So let's watch. Hang on.
Everybody knows that drawings of children are important. They know it's important for children to draw. If you sit down with a kid and watch them draw, it's the most wonderful experience in the world because you're seeing transformation right under your eyes. I've sat with children who are scribbling and scribbling and scribbling, and all of a sudden you're standing there and he draws a circle. And you say, well, how do you like that? Can you draw another one? They never scribble again. And from there they go on. So here we are in the scribble stage. Scribble to the left, scribble to the right, scribble, scribble, scribble. And then with lots of direction until we get to the day when that circle will form out of the coiling lines. And children notice this, and we don't even notice that children are noticing this. Now we've got the circle, and then we get the circle is going to be decorated. It's going to have circles within circles, and circles on top of circles, and circles around circles. And not children shouldn't be hurried out of that stage either, as if that were something that wasn't important. From the circle, after children draw the circle for a long time, frankly, I don't know what impels them, but there's something magnetic that draws children to either drawing right through the center of the circle, because that's what they have available, or drawing out from the periphery. And they do both. They have elaborated the circle, they've used what they had, and out of it they made something different. And out of that will come the first animal or the first human being, because they drop all these extraneous lines and they use something that's very important. From the circle, the child discovers they can drop other lines perpendicularly, all evenly spaced, more or less, and right to the edge of the line. Bunk, 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 bunk. Filled in, neat, tidy, perfect, ending in little circles for the feet. Depending upon the length of the body line, there will be 4 legs or 5 legs. The top one has 8 legs. The larger one has 5 legs. And the little ones, which have shorter body lines, have each 3 legs. So we've got 3, 8, and 5. And in some of them, babies have been included, which are circles within circles. Until now, we've had a horse with 1 body line, and now she discovers that with 2 lines, she gets a completely different type of body. Now the problem, not only getting the body, is getting these legs in a relationship to the body. And you can see in all of these drawings, very different trials. 2 short legs, 2 long legs, two in the back that are short, two in the front that are short. That didn't please her. 2 that were uneven, so she didn't finish that drawing. Here, 3 legs are okay, 1's too short, didn't like that drawing. Here's one that's better. We've got them evenly spaced and evenly related. And not only that, the horses have tails, separate hairs in the tails, and the ears. The horse has ears incorporated, sometimes in the head and sometimes added. Sometimes the horse has got 1 eye and sometimes he's got 2. But you can see the terrific experimentation on the heads of the horses. This is what's so spectacular about these 4 drawings. Now, after drawing many, many horses, she's going to experiment with the line of his back. She's riding, and so she's aware of the horse's back, and she's sitting on it and feeling that too. So she's trying to give him more of a sloping back because she's sitting on him. And these drawings show her attempts at doing that. In one, she incorporates the head. I don't know if that's by accident or whether she intended to do that, but sometimes accidents help children. Something happens, unintended consequences. That's part of art too. But the thing is, does the child notice? And if the child does, it uses it. Now we are at these beautiful horses which have achieved very nice bodies with saddles and stirrups, and they now have reins. And what she's experimenting here actually with is different kinds of heads. The top one you can see, it's a profile with the reins. The other one is a great big head, and the nose comes over in the middle. So you've got between a profile and a forward look. The eye has eyelashes. The nose has 2 nostrils. The details are becoming quite elaborate. The saddles show more than just 1 line for the saddle. They have underlayment, and they have stirrups, and the horses are having hooves, but she hasn't decided on what kind of a head yet. This is real 3 experimental heads. 5 years old. 5 years old. Think of the intelligence that children have at 5 years old. It's incredible. I think you see in the previous drawings that she obviously was looking for something to do with the head. And she achieves that with this diagonal head. And the horse never changes after that. That's his head. It's going to stay there. And in each one, she has tried something new. She's tried a different mane. She's tried the different reins. She has tried different kinds of ears. She's given one spots on his head. She's given one flies on his back so he can whisk them off with his tail. She's tried different legs. I mean, this is really our eureka moment here. You can almost say that the horse has appeared. The horse. One of them even has stripes, spots, the whole ball of wax thrown at him. Oh, they're wonderful.
Okay. So this is a website that you can go to, and you will see a lot about children's art and developmental stages. Definitely go and check this out online. It's earlychildhoodcentral.org. And then, of course, /children's-art/development-stages. And you will see, the exact same thing that we've been talking about here. And it definitely will help you with writing your paper. I'm sure there's more information out there, but this is just a good one. Okay. The next thing I want to talk about is kindergarten and what is known as a new vision. So this is Friedrich Froebel. So Friedrich Froebel was a scientist. The world of crystals, he says, proclaim to me in distinct and unequivocal terms the laws of human life. What the spiritual eye sees inwardly in the world of thought and mind, it sees outwardly in the world of crystals. Man, in his external manifestation, like a crystal, bearing within himself the living unity, shows at first more one-sidedness, individuality, and incompleteness, and only at a later date, as he or she matures, rises to all-sidedness, harmony, and completeness. That's Friedrich Froebel. So he started out as what was known as a crystallographer, or we would say a geologist. And eventually he starts tutoring. He believed that humans are essentially productive and creative, and fulfillment comes through developing those in harmony with God and the world. As a result, Froebel sought to encourage the creation of educational environments for children that involved practical work and the direct use of materials. Through engaging with the world, an understanding unfolds, he says. Hence, the significance of play. It is both a creative activity, and through it, children become aware of their place in the world. And so he was the inventor of kindergarten. And kindergarten in German, and this would have been in Germany, kindergarten in German literally means garden of children. And so one of the things that he did was he created these symmetrical gardens outside of the school. And every child was encouraged to go and work in the garden and to grow food. And every child had their own area to take care of and to tend to. And that this was part of his direct use of materials of the natural world. But he also developed these other tools that he called gifts. And here is a picture of the first gift, or one of the gifts. I think this is gift number 2. He went on to develop these special materials. They were shaped wooden bricks and balls and other types of things. I think there's 22 in all. So he was the first person to come up with the idea of block play for kids. And it was a series, and he also had a series of recommended activities that he called occupations and movement activities, and an inkling set of theories about how to work with all of these things. His original concern was the teaching of young children through educational games in the family. In later years of his life, he became linked with a demand for the provision of special centers for the care and development of children outside the home, which is what became the kindergarten. So here is a look at the first 6 gifts. So the first one is a series of balls that have a little loop on them, and you can put them around your middle finger, and there were games that you would play outside where you would twirl these in a figure 8, and there were songs that you would sing and do all this stuff. But notice that there's something interesting about them. First of all, they're in the primary and secondary colors, and they're perfectly round. Very few things in nature are perfectly round. And so his idea was to take things and make them become these universal or original shapes, if you will. So he thought of things in terms of circle, square, rectangle, and triangle. Okay. And so all the gifts are based on that. So if we look at the second gift there at the top, we can see that, let me go back for a second. There's a cube, a sphere, and a column. And they have, and the ones that Froebel would have made would have had a hole going through it. And then there's a little setup where you can spin them. And if you spin that cube fast enough, it will look like a sphere. If you spin that column fast enough, it will look like a sphere. And his idea was that by doing this, you're basically looking at, Alpha and Omega, God. All things are within God's power. So there is a circle. All things, will be that sphere, no matter what. In the end of the day, all things are made by God. And so this was his kind of physical way to talk about that. And there we see gifts 3 and 4 and 5. And so if you look at gift 3, you'll notice that it's a cube, but it's divided into separate parts. So there's 8 cubes that go in there. And if you look at the cover, you can see a little notch in the cover. And that notch is because when you would get the gift, it would be put upside down, and then you would pull the top off, and then you would have a perfect cube. And it was the same exact size cube as in gift 2. And so then there was a series of projects that you would do with gift 2 to be able to make other things. Gift 4 was rectangles. Gift 5, and that was the same size. So when you pulled it open, it looked exactly like gift 3, except it was a different shape. So he was teaching geometry and math through these gifts, and also creativity, like what could you make with them? And then gift 5, same exact thing, except now we've got triangles, cubes, and rectangles. And then gift 6 gets a little bit bigger, and then we have even more parts. And so here's gift 3, right? And there you can see our cubes. And here's, they would fit, like I said, perfectly into the cubical wooden box and then break up into parts to be reassembled into all different kinds of things. So the idea was that even though it was a cube, because it could just become anything, like whatever you decided. So here's like from the books that he would have. And there you can see, you can make 2 columns. You can make a fireplace. You can make grandpa's chair. You can make grandpa and grandma's chair. You can make a castle with 2 towers. And so all their desks had like a little grid on them. And then they would actually sit and work through these different projects. And when they got all the way done, then of gift 3, they would have all the projects finished and the teacher would mark it off. Then they would go to gift 4. So, it's divided once in its height and breadth and thickness according to the 3 dimensions, which define a solid, and thus 8 smaller cubes are produced. We pass from the undivided to the divided unit, emphasizing the fact that unity still exists, even though it's divided, and enters into a new phase. So children physically, we're looking at how the world works, how things could be one thing 1 minute and then be something else and then go back to the original thing, like go back to its beginning. So it's really quite ingenious. And of course, there were no numbers on there was no painting. There was not, you think about play school nowadays. Oh my gosh, everything is done for the kids, everything. And so the kids don't get to do anything. They don't get to have an imagination, right? Like they have more fun with a big cardboard box from a TV than they do with half of their toys, right? So here's some more. The most important characteristics of the gift are contrasts of size resulting in the abstraction of form, the increase of material as a whole, and the decrease of size in parts, increase of facilities in illustrating form and number. The new experience to be found in this first divided body is the area of relativity of the whole in its relation to its parts, like each of the parts in relation to the whole. So the form of the parts is like the form of the whole, but in shape alike, the dissimilarity also can happen. The fact becoming more apparent by a variety of combinations of different numbers of sizes. Thus, the relationship of the numbers are introduced to the observation of the child through form and magnitude, and they start to understand how things balance and how things work without the use of symbols to do it, which they know nothing of what it means. What does 2 mean? Well, 2 doesn't mean anything to me. 2 blocks means something to me, but the number 2 on a piece of paper means nothing to me. Okay, so here's some more. And the third gift was intended by Froebel to meet the necessities of the child at a period when no longer satisfied with external appearance of things. He strives to penetrate their internal condition, to create, to be creative, and to produce things, and begins to realize the many different possibilities of the same element. So 3, 4, and 5. The fourth gift consists of a cube measuring 2 inches in each of its dimensions. It is divided once vertically in its height and 3 times horizontally in its thickness. Like the third gift in form, size, and material in use, it is unlike in division. In the third gift, the parts were like each other and like the whole, so they were cubes. But in the fourth gift, they are unlike the whole, so they're rectangles, right? So it completely changes. And then it's a greater height and greater extension. So again, it's a progression. In the difficulty of dictation and manipulation arising from different characters of the faces of the brick and the many positions that each brick could assume. In the necessity of perfect balance. In a clear illustration of dimension, in the third gift, the parts are equal. In the fourth, they are unequal, and they still can be used as building blocks. And here we have the sixth gift. The sixth gift is a 3-inch cube, so it's larger, like I'd said, and it's cut into 36 pieces. So first of all, just to get it back in the box is kind of a big deal. And I know because I have one of these sets. So, but just think of a little child. Pretty interesting. 12 additional pieces are formed by cutting 6 of these parallelepipeds or units of measure in half, breadthwise, giving blocks with 2 squares and 4 oblong faces. The remaining 6 pieces are formed by cutting 3 other units of measure in half and lengthwise. And the sixth is the last of the solid gifts, and it is an extension of the fourth from which it differs in size and numbers of parts. It deals with multiples of numbers of 2 and 3 in halves. The most important characteristics of the gifts are irregularity for division, introduction of a column, extent of surface, so there's more surface because there's some more symmetrical items, greater enclosure of space in symmetrical forms, introduction of distinct styles like architecture, and greater heights of life in forms, and severe simplicity of life form. And the sixth gift has no great increase of difficulty, though, to do all of the different problems, just like in gifts 3, 4, and 5. And then we move on to gifts 7, 8, 9, and 10. And I said there's 22, and we're not going to get into all of them. But here we have some things that look really familiar, like Chinese checkers, or like that parquet pattern, or like things that look like Lincoln logs and erector sets, right, which we start to see later on. So these were all invented by Froebel, and the children would go through all of the gifts and continue to go. Now, it's not that big of a deal, right? Why look at old school kindergarten from over 100 and plus years ago, almost 200 years ago? Well, we can look at something else when we're talking about art and architecture, and we can look at architecture and say, well, this is really interesting. If we start children out early on doing all this kind of stuff, what happens? Well, we know that here's some of the architects who went to kindergarten and used Froebel's gifts. Corbusier, Frank Lloyd Wright, and Walter Gropius. The first kindergarten in the United States was in Watertown, Wisconsin, where Frank Lloyd Wright grew up. Here we have Corbusier. This is the Villa Savoy. What does it remind you of? What do we have? Rectangles, spheres, right? It was designed by the Swiss architect Le Corbusier and built between 1928 and 1931 with reinforced concrete. A manifesto of Corbusier's 5 points of new architecture. The villa represented the basis of modern architecture. And here we have a version of it in a Lego form. But what do we have? We have freestanding support pillars. We have open floor plans independent from supports. We have a vertical facade that is free from the supports. We have long horizontal sliding windows, and we have roof gardens. This is in 1928, people. You know what I'm saying? What are we doing today? Here's another one of Corbusier's. This is a home that was built in Zurich, And it has a lot of glass. I don't know, I necessarily would like all that much glass. Really interesting shapes, though. Here's a chair from Le Corbusier. Again, looking at those metal gifts. This is Frank Lloyd Wright. This is the Roby House in Chicago. Again, just a series of rectangles. And remember in the other lecture when we looked at the Falling Water House, right? Same kind of idea. This is the Guggenheim Museum, Solomon Guggenheim Museum, that was also built and designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, very much like that last gift that we looked at, the circular one on the bottom corner of the slide. Here's the exterior. It's a cylindrical building, wider at the top than at the bottom, was conceived as a temple of the spirit, is one of the 20th century's most important architectural landmarks. The building opened in October 21st, 1959, and it replaced rented spaces that was being used by the museum. And so what's cool about it is you can like look all the way up and you can see all the art like all the time. Like it's all in these circular spaces. You can see from the bottom. And sometimes they put huge kinds of, sculptures and things like hanging from the center. It's a unique ramp gallery, extends from just under the skylight in the ceiling in a long continuous spiral along the outer edges of the building until it reaches to the ground level. This is Walter Gropius. He also was a manufacturer of kindergarten. This was one of his first buildings. It's a Vegas shoe factory, and it was designed by himself and Adolf Meyer in 1925. And what was so great about this is he understood that he could hang glass on steel and not have to have all that brick, and it would cost much less. Plus, it was much better for the workers because they could bring nature in, so they could see the outside, they could see the sun. They weren't in these damp, dark buildings, right, that we were building in the 1800s. So here's another view there. And you can see, look at the railings, right? They're just beautiful. Vegas Shoe Factory. Here's his home. And there's a circular staircase on the outside of his home. And that pretty much takes us to the end of this slide. So I wanted to show you just really how much and how important it is for us to really think about the way that we introduce materials to children and how children are using art on a regular basis. We think of the word art, we're always thinking of things like, fine artists like Michelangelo or Leonardo da Vinci. But the reality is that we're all making marks. We're all making marks. And what is making marks about? It's about making something special. And so you are making art all the time, the behavior or the product, right? So going back to that initial statement, is it the behavior or is it the product? Well, for children, it's definitely the behavior, right? They are learning so much by being able to recreate their world. And that's where we'll stop until next time. Thank you.